Good evening. I'd like to call the committee of the whole for the Village of Cary for Tuesday, October 2nd, 2018 to order with roll call, please.
Weinhammer?
Here.
Kostler?
Here.
Betts?
Here.
McAlpine?
Here.
Cavelli? Here. Kraus?
Here.
Thank you. Would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll now move to the public comment section. We have one person sign in, Mary Hall.
Well, good evening. It's really a pleasure to be part of this and to listen to the efficiency with which you conduct business here. I've been to a number of city council, village board meetings, and I'm really impressed by the professionalism and the legalistic character of many of these meetings that I've attended. I have a couple of things I would like to bring up tonight for consideration by the committee. I have discussed these issues with Jake, with Mrs. Weinhammer, and Mr. Morimoto. The first one I want to bring up is mosquito abatement. Every village around here, to my knowledge, has a mosquito spraying program, except Cary. And so if I were a smart mosquito, I wouldn't hang in Crystal Lake or Algonquin or Lith. I would come to Cary because there's no spray here. So I have talked to a number of people about this issue, citizens, not just people who are in government. And there's a lot of distrust about that. And just because they don't come up here and speak to you doesn't mean that the problem isn't very real. Of course, you know, the friends I've made here are more in my age group. And I need to tell you that one of them, in order to escape a horde, and she called it a horde of mosquitoes, at her own front door, fell into her home, fell on her tile floor, and was injured because of mosquitoes. I mean, the mosquitoes didn't plan that, but that's what the consequence was of her trying to escape being bitten. And I'll tell you, in my experience, one day in June, I had 17 bites. That's a lot, you know, and I've been around a long time. I've never had that many bites in my life. So what I am bringing up is just a few facts, and if you want this to read into the minutes or whatever, Jake, you know, it's just 2 pages, but I'm not going to say it all. But mosquitoes spread infectious disease, and there's 2 reasons to spray. First of all, to avoid the biting I just talked about, and then to preclude the disease that I'm going to explain in a second here. The CDC and WHO, the World Health Organization, both support mosquito abatement programs. I happen to have been acquainted with one of the former directors of the World Health Organization, and he said that's really a problem, especially in high water content areas geographically that have a lot of water. They are disease spreaders. So we have the mosquitoes, we know that already, and we are always subject to the diseases they carry because we don't know where they have been. And because so many of us travel internationally, I know I have done, and probably each of you has done, we need to be aware that going through all these different places with all these different exposures that we experience, we are bringing in things that we may not be aware of, okay? So in order to prevent them becoming a public health hazard, I am going to really suggest that Cary consider spraying on a regular basis, starting perhaps not immediately now, but certainly for the next spring and summer season. Wanted to tell you that some of the diseases were eye-openers for me that are spread by mosquitoes. The West Nile virus. And even when I was living in St. Louis, there were dead jays in my yard, and the animal control officer said it was a function of West Nile virus, which is mosquito-borne. And we even sprayed in St. Louis. So The second one is dog heartworm, which I did not know. That was an eye-opener for me. That is spread by Aedes, Anopheles, and Mansonia species of mosquitoes. Now, probably each of us has a dog. I have 2 myself, so that was scary. And then more recently, Zika virus, which has been up in the news just in the past 2 years, dengue and chikungunya, but that's more of a tropical disease, have also emerged, though, as serious threats to human health. And because there is so much international traffic around, what I'm saying is that these little fellows can come in on airplanes and cars, through any vehicular traffic comes in, and then start their own little generational ancestry here in Cary. We need to really look at and seriously assess getting mosquito spray done starting next year. I investigated the safety issue. I have a background in science, and I feel I have to investigate this so that I know nothing is toxic. And what research I've done in the 4 or 5 ways I've researched this is that there is no harm to children, pets, or adults. The sprays are 2 types, one for adults, one for larvae, and they are non-toxic to human beings or to mammals, as far as my research has carried me. The spraying occurs, as you probably know, in the evening, and you can stay indoors, but even inhaling it is not going to be detrimental too much to health. Now, when I brought this issue up to the 3 government executives I talked to, I was told that money was an issue, and that's why we don't do it. I pay more taxes here than I've ever paid anywhere in the country, and I've lived all around the country. I wonder where the money is being used that we can't afford mosquito spraying. And if that is an object, Mrs. Weinhammer knows how to get me, and so does Mr. Himoda. Let me know, give me a line item budget so that I can see where the money has gone instead of to mosquito abatement, because this is a fairly serious issue, and Cary stands out as being the only town, village in this area that doesn't spray. All right. The second thing is just something for my own convenience. I have never in my life had brown bags for yard waste. I find them impractical, impossible to use, and really unmanageable because they tear and shred and they don't hold a lot. I've always had a yard bin. Every place I've been, Midwest, the West Coast, Southwest, wherever I've been, we've had yard waste bins. I know that the contract is coming up. I don't know when. Did you tell me, Eric, when the contract was coming up? Or someone told me the contract was coming up for evaluation.
I believe it's next year.
It is next year. I'd like you to consider having, instead of my paying $25 a month for yard waste bins, having it be part of a bundle for prices for that, so that we can all have the advantage of a yard waste bin. Many people here in my age range, it's extremely difficult to use brown paper bags. I've struggled with it and I've tried. It does not work for me. I'd rather put it in my car and go to the Algonquin brush drop, which is, again, a really big effort for senior citizens to do. So I'm going to ask you to consider, if you keep staying with Advance, that's not an issue for me. It's bundling the cost so that every person doesn't have to pay $25 a month for a yard waste bin, and just making that a 3-bin event, trash, recycling, and yard waste. Okay.
Mary, you're talking about having a toter, like a refuse toter for yard waste?
Mine have always been the size of the recycling bin, but they were green to differentiate recycling blue.
But like you have right now for refuse with wheels? Okay.
Yes. So those were my comments.
Thank you. Is there anybody else I'd like to talk to, though? You want to
I
address?
just want to answer one question.
Okay.
I think I had mentioned to you on the phone, the contract with Advanced Disposal does provide and allow for yard waste toters. It is by rental, as Ms. Hall mentioned. It is between, I believe, $25 and $30 per year for that rental. $25. Not per month, but per year.
A month?
Oh, no, I just called them today. It's $25.
They said per month? Okay, we were told.
Yeah, we can
otherwise.
check into that then.
Okay. But we have a meeting with Advanced anyway, we will confirm that. But it is an option that is offered right now, but we obviously can't look at it with our next contract.
Thank you.
Jay, could you elaborate a little bit about what the village does do in terms of mosquito abatement? 'Cause, I mean, there are programs.
Yeah,
We're going to talk about it.
Yep,
Okay.
yep, absolutely.
It's
Yeah,
on
we're
the
going to cover
agenda.
that.
Anybody else want to address the committee of the whole? Let's talk about fireworks.
Okay, this is a supplement to the presentation that was made previously related to fireworks. In your board packet, there was a cover memo where I looked at some online ordinances through Municode and Sterling Codifier. I picked a couple of different municipalities to kind of compare and contrast how they control noise, and that's there for your reference. What we did, what I did in regards to our response to our conversation last, or board meeting before last, is address 3 issues in our current village ordinance. The first issue is in the fine table, and that was to increase the fines for a firework violation from 50 and 100 to 75 and 150, which is in line with all the other ordinance violations that we have. There's only one other 50 to 100, and that's a weed nuisance issue. Everything else generally is either 75 and 100 or 100 or 200. And then I addressed 2 sections of the village code. The first code section that was addressed was section 8.28.010, fireworks, and we just added the word possess. So now it includes unlawful to store or possess any fireworks in the village except as may be necessary for performance of licensed exhibitions. The second thing we addressed was noise. That's section 9.16.130. And what I did in reference to that table that I developed was to de facto make the production of noise by means of a pyrotechnic or a firework during the period of 11 p.m. to 10 p.m. to be a violation of our noise ordinance. So that's what that does, and it also exempts out those exhibitions or displays that are allowed by the village board through our permitting process. So those are the 3 sections that that were addressed. I deferred Attorney Euler if he had any further conversation or comment, and then I would be happy to take any questions you may have or comments.
Only that for those who are listening, we have the text in front of us. It was between 11 p.m. and 10 a.m. I think you said 10 p.m.
I'm sorry about that.
That would be very restrictive.
Well, in those hours, when you look at the table in comparison to some area municipalities, ours would be much more restrictive than what they had in those other tables. Some had no hours defined, and I thought that the best one, I just kind of like this, but the best one was discordant noise, because I just thought that that was an interesting word.
What does that mean?
Unusual, loud. Yeah.
It's kind of hard to define. Noise.
I believe. So any comments, reaction? I'd be happy to take questions or inquiries.
And then this would also, I mean, if an officer comes across an offender, can take things, but for a resident, there would have to be a complaint filed to pursue this.
Actually, no. Our officers could be proactive in regards to this. I don't know that they would be extremely proactive in regards to this. It would normally be in response to some type of a complaint as it relates to noise or fireworks being used. But it doesn't preclude them from doing it as a proactive measure.
Well, I guess I'm referring to if a resident calls and complains about it, they have to be willing to sign a complaint to move it forward.
Only if the officer doesn't see it.
Right.
Because we need some testimony that indicates that it occurred. But if the officer sees it by his own observation, then he can sign the complaint or issue a violation. And again, the violations that we're talking about here are ordinance violations so that they can issue non-traffic or ordinance violation citations, and we can hear them in our administrative hearings.
And Chief, by seize it, you're also including possession, so is that part of that equation?
Well, yeah, if it's illegal to possess them, yes, we would have to seize it. And that creates all sorts of other issues in regards to storage and destruction that we still do have those issues now. But certainly if we were becoming more proactive, we would have to find a manner in which to safely store them and then dispose of them. It's always an issue.
Anybody else have any comments on this?
I do have a comment just about the time. Could we do it earlier, like from 10 a.m. till, because it's till 10 p.m., yeah, because it's till 11 p.m.? That's pretty late.
At 10 p.m.? You want to start with that 10 p.m. meeting?
No, I want to start at like 10 a.m.
So you want to allow it from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m.?
Yeah.
So,
Like
and the
later
reason that,
nights, you know, it's 11 o'clock at night to be shooting off for the noise.
yeah, and I think the reason that I kind of settled on 11 o'clock was two reasons. Number one, I looked at the other municipalities, and I think that we're pretty much in line in regards to some of the other municipalities, although 10 o'clock seems to be 10:30, 9. But the other part of that equation is at the end of the fireworks displays for 4th of July, generally what happens is people go to the public display and then they come home and then they use their own. So I think where people start being intolerant in regards to the noise that's generated by fireworks is about 11 o'clock. That was the thought process that I have, but I'd be open to what you'd think
I
as
would
it
be in
relates
favor
to.
of moving it to 10 p.m. instead of 11 p.m. earlier. Fine with that.
I mean, I'd be okay with that too.
10 p.m. down there instead of 11?
I just need to clarify then. So we're saying we can't have fireworks, but then we're saying we will allow them between the hours of 10 a.m. to 11?
No, that doesn't necessarily mean that. It means that de facto, if you use a firework between, if it was 10 p.m. to 10 a.m. the next day, that would violate the ordinance. Now, there's
The
noise ordinance. It's not the fireworks. It's always illegal to possess a firework. But if you use it to generate noise, then we would address it, because when we discussed this before, it was more the noise than it was the fireworks that we were concerned about. And the other part of this equation, and I don't know where it's going to go, but there's a House bill out there, 5928, and there's a potential that they could make fireworks legal, and there is an exemption in that where it says that if the use of fireworks does not place him or her in violation of any local ordinance. So we can adjust those hours.
Okay.
We could be more restrictive.
Yeah, I'm okay with 11.
If we're thinking about splitting the difference, we could do 10 o'clock, 10:30, excuse me, like Buffalo Grove.
That'd be fine.
10:30?
Sure.
Trying to compromise here? Does it make a difference to anybody, really?
Fine.
We'll move forward with 10:30, Chief.
Good enough.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you.
Now, let's talk about mosquito control. I know you're all ready for this one, Garrick.
Thank you, Mayor. We had a good introduction from Ms. Hall, but as the board is aware, we've had some unusual weather this September in particular. We had a very large stretch of very wet weather, particularly every day weekend. We had extreme amounts of rainfall followed up immediately by extended above average temperatures, which are prime conditions, obviously, for the hatching and the spreading of mosquitoes. We did receive various calls from residents noting the particularly bad season we were having with the mosquitoes. We did explain some of the programs that we do have in place currently. A lot of our efforts right now concentrate on larval control, which specifically we every year budget about $500 or so for the introduction of beneficial predators to our wet bottom detention ponds. So these minnows are placed and stocked in partnership with the park district. So we buy them in bulk because they do the same thing in their ponds as well. These fish are very good at feeding on the larvae of the mosquitoes before they turn into the adults that end up causing the nuisance problems. So that, along with the introduction of larval briquettes in our catch basins. The other prime area in our village control within our rights-of-way are the catch basins and inlets for our stormwater system. There's a sump, it's called a sump, so it's the bottom of the manholes themselves do have a small collection area between the bottom of the structure before it hits the bottom of the pipes that travel between the structures. So that area will sometimes collect a little bit of water. These briquettes are dropped in there and dissolve, and then over time maintain a certain level of the larvicide to keep the mosquitoes from laying their eggs and hatching in those spots. So that is the basis for our mosquito control program. There are other options out there. Obviously, some of their communities utilize outside contracting services to expand upon the larval controls that beyond what we already do as a village. Those would include additional applications by backpack or by aircraft of some more larvicides and water bodies from a plane or helicopter. That combined with some monitoring and surveillance so they can actually have traps and pinpoint the exact number of mosquitoes that are present and then what types are there as well in order to help determine when to dispatch those larval spraying and as well as the adult control spraying. And that's the third element of the program that currently we do not have budgeted. That typically is a spraying that is done either by aircraft or by truck mounted sprayers that drive through the public rights of way. And what that does is that it emits a insecticide that kills the mosquitoes that are alive and adults on contact, whether they be in the air or if they're resting in their typical hiding places in cool, dark, damp places. Most common places where they are resting are under decks, under furniture, the bottom sides of shrubs and canopies of trees. And I think one of the reasons we have particularly high call volumes, especially in areas that were adjacent to wooded properties. We have a lot of parks in this area owned by whether it's the conservation district or the park district, the natural areas, and that seems to be one of the primary areas where the mosquitoes were the worst. One of the drawbacks to adult control, unfortunately, is one, the cost, and we're estimating it's probably about $5,000 per spraying for a village of our size based on a previous quote that would need to be refreshed. But also the fact that it is acknowledged, it is as Ms. Hall mentioned, when applied properly and by a professional, it is safe. But we do also note that it is short-lived and short-lasting. So a lot of times with the repeated cycles of rainfall that occurs immediately right after a spraying is done, for instance, you'll have a whole new batch of mosquitoes that could be ready to go in about 3 to 5 days. So to keep the overall adult populations down, depending on the weather conditions, you may have to be spraying fairly repeatedly, which may raise some concerns from people that are concerned about the health effects. While I mentioned it is safe, there still are some perception that it's not the greatest thing that they want to have the chemicals applied through the air, and also the cost. That and also with all the wooded areas that are in this village, there's a lot of places that are actually not accessible by either aircraft or by the trucks from the rights of way. A lot of the heavy trees and the private properties that we don't own, we don't have roads that go deeper into those woods, we won't be able to treat those areas. Nor can these truck-mounted sprayers hit the backyards where I think a lot of the other mosquitoes are tending to breed. But that being said, if it is something that is desired, we can look at it in our next budget cycle. We do estimate that doing a full mosquito control program with an outside consultant, maybe comparable to what other municipalities do, would be from a pure larval control program in the $30,000 range or so. And if you're going to add in the adult control spraying, then you would tack on probably another $20,000 to $40,000, depending on how many sprayings are needed. most communities that we've surveyed typically budget for about one spraying a month during the peak season. So we're talking 4 to 5 sprayings. But like I mentioned, with the amount of fluctuations in weather and rainfall, that time period between the 1 month interval of sprayings, you could have other areas of high need that aren't going to be addressed based on those budgets. So you would have to, depending on the season, like I mentioned, maybe account for a higher budget than that. I think from a comparable standpoint, nearby communities, looks like one of our larger neighbors budgets about over $100,000 per year in mosquito control, while some of the other towns that are larger than Cary but more comparable in our size are spending in the $50,000 to $60,000 range. So with that, I'm happy to answer any other questions, and also we can continue this with the budget process as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to provide a general update to the village board. Not looking for any direction right now unless there is from the village board, and we can certainly continue the discussion here during our budget discussions in the spring.
Would we be able to, out of curiosity, if Cary as a whole wanted to do something this in my, and I could be wrong, but in my humble opinion, I don't know a lot about this, but I would think that the most effective way would be to do it in conjunction with the Park District getting involved in doing it, the McHenry County Conservation getting involved in it. Is there a way to reach out to see if they would be interested and all of us could partner? Because to me, it's silly to say, I'm going to spray your neighborhood, but not the park where the kids mostly are. I don't know whether it's a cost-effective measure or not, but I'm just curious they would be interested in entertaining a discussion about that.
We'd be happy
Or if anyone thinks that.
We'd be happy to reach out to them. Absolutely.
And just to find out what kind of programs they have in place currently
Right.
in terms of
If
targeting
any.
mosquitoes.
I do know that the Cary Park District, because we did respond to one comment from a resident, he commented specifically about a property that was Park District owned, but
Right.
adjacent to our roadway. And their staff also responded off the same email I did. They also do the same approach as us, as the natural treatments with the beneficial predators, fish in the ponds and so forth, but they do not do any sprayings.
Okay.
One thing I did also note in our research, there aren't very many large scale contractors that do this on the municipal basis. There are a lot of smaller firms that, from a residential contract side, if you want to have your backyard done, there's obviously several firms out there that do that. But as far as the companies that handle the big contracts on a municipal scale, there aren't very many. The majority of the communities in our area also only use one firm, I've noticed. So as far as the ability to get like a joint price, kind of combining our different areas, the one company that we got the quote from is already in the area and kind of already doing the whole region. So I don't know if there would be any cost savings as far as partnering with other communities or agencies.
Right.
But it's definitely something we always ask the question, of course.
So right now, our costs, as far as mitigation, are negligible.
Yeah, with the briquettes and the fish, we probably spend in the neighborhood of a few $1,000s a year.
Okay. And to step it up to the next level is, you're thinking a minimum of 30,000.
Yeah, and that's with no spraying for adult mosquitoes, just kind of a enhanced larval control process. So
Okay.
beyond just the catch basins where we have people with helicopters or backpacks going to every water body that's under our jurisdiction,
Right.
which honestly is only one right now and possibly two, obviously, in the coming months.
This expense too, it would have to be absorbed by the general fund. And as we've talked about here during our budget sessions, I mean, we see expenses, creeping up here with our contractual obligations that we have, commodities, health insurance costs. Our revenues they're flat, and there isn't any increase in our revenues that we're seeing. So this would have to be absorbed by the general fund, and certainly if it's a priority from the village board, we can discuss it in the spring.
Eric, I'm wondering if there might be an alternative to this, such as like bat habitat, bat houses, because I know that's a huge deterrent for mosquitoes.
I did look into that as well, at least from an online research perspective. I've seen mixed results with regards to that, mainly because some species of bats do feed on mosquitoes. It's not their primary diet, and this by sheer volume, the number of mosquitoes to the bats would probably have a very negligible effect, at least regionally from the village-wide standpoint. It may have maybe a minor benefit isolated to certain areas if you concentrated the bats there. But no, that's an outside the box approach. So that's one we can kind of dig into deeper beyond the kind of minor research we've done so far.
Any other comments? Budget cycle? Thank you. Safe routes to school grant application discussion?
All right, thank you, Mayor. So this evening, we have before you a discussion on a potential grant opportunity through the state of Illinois. It is a federal program that they administer for the Safe Routes to School program. So this program is designed to provide 3 goals: improve child safety in their transit between home and school and back, of course, reducing pollution, and encouraging better health. This program has been around for a number of years. They do have a minor modification this year. They are trying to spend down a balance that they currently have in that federal funding. So for the first time, they're actually offering 100% funding towards construction. Typically, there's been a local match required. They've also modified the application process, so there's a little bit less involved in preparing the necessary data to support your application. So with that, we have proposed a project to School District 26 along our West Main Street corridor by Briargate Elementary. And what this would do would eliminate the gap in the existing sidewalk that is between Carroll Algonquin and Briargate Road. So the north side has sidewalk and the south side currently does not. So right now, kids that do walk to and from school at Briargate typically are dismissed out the doors, come up Wolf Street. There's a crossing guard at that uncontrolled intersection. And then they walk on the sidewalk on the north side of Main, cross Carroll Algonquin at the signal. And then there's about, I think we estimated about 1,000 to 1,200 homes within a mile radius of Briargate on that west side, that if they were walking, the vast majority, if not all, of those homes and those students would cross at the signal here. So right now, obviously homes on the south side of Main Street would cross at that signal, but they are also then crossing from the south to the north, only to come back again and cross to the south. So the sidewalk would eliminate one more crossing at an uncontrolled location aside from the crossing guard. With that, we're also proposing 2 other safety improvements in the corridor to go along with the sidewalk gap. This is just a visual rendering of the location. You can see there the West Main Street with and without the sidewalk. First would be included in the grant, we request the installation of 2 radar feedback speed display signs for that corridor. So what these do is just highlight the speed to the motorists that are driving on the roadway themselves, especially given that there's a school zone there where the speed limit is 20 miles per hour when children are present. Then the second element in the corridor would be to take that Wolf Street at West Main Street intersection where the crossing guard is currently posted. Crossing guard would remain in place because there's still homes that would cross from the north side to the south side there. But we would introduce a raised pedestrian safety median just at the intersection there, so that when students are crossing, even at times without the crossing guard present, say people are walking from the neighborhoods to the north to the community center or to the pool, there would be a place to stop halfway that's somewhat protected for people to then concentrate on navigating safely from one direction of traffic at a time. And in addition to that, we would replace the current pre-timed warning lights that are at the crossing and replace them with pedestrian activated rectangular rapid flashing beacons, which tend to have a more noticeable flash pattern and a higher compliance rate. So that could be utilized, like I mentioned, with pedestrians without a crossing guard there. And then when the crossing guard is there, the crossing guard can activate the beacon combined with their normal duties with their portable stop sign. So that project, so the sidewalk extension, the radar feedback signs, the raised median, and the rapid flashing beacons, we believe would fall under the threshold of the grant programs for 100% funding for construction. There's a $200,000 project limit, which we believe this would be close to or just under that. Other requirements of the program, which this project meets, are being within 2 miles of an elementary or middle school, and being able to obligate within 18 months and complete construction within 3 years of award. The other element of particular note is that with this program this year, school districts are required to, with the application, provide a resolution of support. They don't have to necessarily participate in implementing the project, but they do have to support the project and provide that resolution. But they are only allowed to provide one resolution per application cycle. So if there was another project in the district's limits, whether it be from a Village of Cary desire or another agency, they would only be able to choose one. So right now, we are currently waiting to finalize the decision of the school district if they're going to support this project or if there's another job that they would prefer to look into. Our initial meeting was very favorable, that they seemed to really support the idea of this project, particularly with the raised safety meeting as well. The only other element, so we would have to submit the application, which is due toward the end of November. And then the review process has the announcement and award of the grants in March of 2019. Then at that point, basically the project would go into our next fiscal year for a little bit of design work we'd have to do to produce the engineering plans into a format that can be reviewed and approved by IDOT, since it is a federal grant program. That would be a fairly minimal cost to that exercise. And then we would front the cost for construction and then get it rebated through the grant. So it'd probably be constructed in 2020 if it were approved. So we're just looking for the committee's feedback on whether they would support us pursuing this grant opportunity. And if getting concurrence with the school district, we would start the process for the application and see what we can do.
Any feedback for Eric? This is an outstanding opportunity for us. It's something that we kicked to through our budget cycle last year, we eliminated the sidewalk gap. And this is a good project for that. So I think it's a great presentation. I think it will work. School districts on board for the most part, do you think?
I believe so. So they were waiting to hear one other proposal from another agency. So after they were finished listening to that one, they were going to review their options and let us know.
We had a good meeting. We had a good meeting with them and certainly want to be respectful of their process here, and we'll hear what they have to say. So
I think it's great that you seek out these type of grants. I think that that's commendable, and if it works with the school district, I think that's fantastic.
Any other comments? Thank you, Eric. Well done.
Very much.
I will entertain a motion to adjourn into executive session to discuss litigation pending or imminent, Illinois 122C11, and closed session minutes review, Illinois 122C21.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. We will, as soon as the board